The sharp hum of the security alarm shutting off was the only sound that broke the silence of the grand estate as Nicholas Reed stepped onto the marble-floored balcony of his Beverly Hills mansion. The sun was dipping into the horizon, casting an amber glow over the manicured lawns and towering iron gates that separated his world from the one outside. He adjusted the cuffs of his crisp navy suit, taking a sip of his evening espresso, his usual ritual after back-to-back meetings. The mansion, a towering testament to his wealth, had been designed to keep the outside world at bay, ensuring that only those he deemed worthy could step into his carefully curated existence. Yet for the past 3 days something, or rather someone, had disrupted that balance. A little girl. She had been standing just beyond the gates, her small figure barely noticeable at first. On the first day he had dismissed it as a coincidence. The second day he had assumed she was lost or waiting for someone. But today, as the clock struck 7 and he once again saw her tiny frame standing motionless near the entrance, he found himself growing irritated. She wasn't playing, wasn't talking to anyone, wasn't holding a phone like most kids her age. She was simply staring. Nicholas had always prided himself on being a man who didn't let trivial matters distract him. He had built his fortune from nothing, clawing his way up from a childhood spent in a cramped Detroit apartment to owning one of the largest investment firms in the country. He didn't believe in sentimentality. Yet, as he watched the girl, something about her unwavering gaze unsettled him. He turned away, shaking off the nagging feeling, but when he glanced back, she was still there. He pressed a button on his intercom. Adam, check the front gate. There's a kid standing there again. Find out what she wants. His head of security, a former LAPD officer, responded immediately. On it, sir. Nicholas walked back inside, his thoughts drifting toward the stock reports on his desk. But before he could refocus, his phone buzzed. It was Adam. Sir, I approached her but she won't talk much. Just said she's looking. Nicholas frowned. Looking for what? She wouldn't say. Just kept staring at the house. Should I send her away? Nicholas hesitated. No. Just keep an eye on her. Make sure she's not causing trouble. As the evening stretched on, Nicholas tried to push the matter out of his mind, but his curiosity kept getting the better of him. By 10 o'clock, when he stepped outside again, the girl was gone. But the next evening she was back. And the next. On the 5th day, Nicholas decided he had enough. He wasn't a man who liked mysteries, and he certainly wasn't about to let some kid disrupt his peace. Stepping out of his mansion for the first time in weeks, he walked toward the massive iron gates. As he neared, the girl finally turned her head toward him. She was small, no more than 8 or 9 years old, with pale skin and tangled brown hair that looked as if it hadn't been brushed in days. Her clothes were simple, worn jeans and a faded pink sweatshirt with a hole near the sleeve. Nicholas folded his arms. Why are you standing here every day? The girl didn't flinch at his directness. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with large, dark eyes. I just like looking, she said softly. Her voice was so quiet that Nicholas had to lean in slightly to hear her. Looking at what? She hesitated, then pointed toward the house. It's nice. Nicholas exhaled, his patience wearing thin. Where are your parents? Do they know you're here? She shook her head. My mom's at work. Where do you live? The girl hesitated again, glancing at the security cameras as if weighing whether or not to answer. Finally, she pointed down the street. Not far. Nicholas studied her. She didn't look scared or particularly desperate, but there was something in her eyes, something that made him uneasy. He had seen countless people try to manipulate their way into his wealth, but this child didn't seem to be asking for anything. She was just there. You can't just stand outside my house every day, he said finally. It's private property. The girl's expression didn't change. I know. Then why do you keep coming back? She hesitated again, then looked at the mansion one more time before meeting his gaze. Because it looks like home. Nicholas felt something twist inside his chest, an unfamiliar tightening that made him shift uncomfortably. Oh, what did she mean? There was no way this child had ever stepped foot in his mansion. He would have remembered. He wanted to ask more, to demand an explanation, but before he could, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the dimly lit street. That night, Nicholas found himself staring at the security footage, watching as the little girl stood outside his house for hours before finally leaving. Her words echoed in his mind, "It looks like home." It made no sense. He knew no one from his past who would have a daughter this age. No long-lost relatives. No connections to anything that would explain why she was drawn to his house. And yet, something about her gaze haunted him. For the first time in years, Nicholas Reed felt something other than power and control. He felt a question gnawing at him, a question that he wasn't sure he wanted answered. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Nicholas barely slept that night. He had never been the kind of man who let anything bother him for too long, but the little girl's words kept repeating in his mind, "It looks like home." It made no sense. How could his mansion, a place he built from the ground up with no ties to anyone from his past, be something that felt familiar to a random child? It wasn't like he had ever lived in a house like this growing up. His childhood in Detroit had been nothing but small apartments and government housing. He spent most of his life trying to escape that world, yet now, standing in his massive bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles, he felt strangely restless. By morning, he had convinced himself that the whole situation was just some weird coincidence. Maybe the girl was just fascinated by big houses. Maybe she had seen it in a magazine or on TV. Whatever it was, he needed to forget about it. He had a meeting downtown with potential investors for a new real estate project, and that was what mattered. But as he stepped into his black Mercedes, his driver, Luis, hesitated before pulling out of the driveway. "Mr. Reed, you might want to see this," Luis said, nodding toward the gate. Nicholas turned his head, and there she was again. The little girl. Standing in the same spot as if she had never left. Frustration flared in his chest. He could not let a child become a distraction in his life. Without thinking, he pushed the car door open and walked straight toward her. "What are you doing here again?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. The girl didn't flinch. She just looked up at him with those same quiet, knowing eyes. "Just looking." Nicholas exhaled, rubbing his temple. "You said that yesterday. But why here? Why this house?" For a moment, the girl said nothing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, "Did you ever live here before?" Nicholas frowned. "No. I built this house 5 years ago." The girl seemed to consider this for a second, then looked at the mansion again. "It looks like a place I remember," she said softly. Nicholas stared at her. There was no way she had ever been inside. This house was custom designed, and the only people who had ever stepped foot in it were the architects, interior designers, and a few business associates. "Where do you live?" he asked again. She hesitated, then finally mumbled, "Lincoln Heights." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. Lincoln Heights was miles away from Beverly Hills. It was one of the older neighborhoods in Los Angeles, far from the polished wealth of this part of town. "That's pretty far. How do you get here?" The girl shrugged. "I walk." He stared at her in disbelief. Lincoln Heights was at least 8 miles away. If she was telling the truth, that meant she had been walking for hours every day just to stand in front of his house. "Where's your mom?" he asked. "She works," the girl said simply. Nicholas sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He was wasting time. He had a meeting to get to, and this wasn't his problem. But as he looked at the girl, something about her calm, almost detached way of speaking made him pause. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she said. Nicholas nodded. "All right, Lily. Listen to me. You can't just keep standing outside my house. People are going to think you're trespassing. It's not safe." Lily tilted her head slightly. "Are you scared?" Nicholas frowned. "What? You said it's not safe. But you live here and you're not scared." He didn't know whether to be annoyed or amused. "That's different. I have security." Lily's expression didn't change. "I'm not scared either." Nicholas let out a short breath. He was arguing with a child and he was losing. Glancing at his watch, he knew he had to leave. He looked at Adam, who had stepped out of the security booth, watching the interaction closely. "Make sure she gets home," Nicholas ordered before turning back to his car. As he slid into the back seat, Luis glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "You okay, boss?" Nicholas didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure why, but something about that little girl unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. "Just drive," he muttered. The meeting in downtown LA was as exhausting as expected. Investors, numbers, projections, it was the world Nicholas knew best. But even as he shook hands and made deals, his mind kept drifting back to Lily. By the time he returned home late that night, he found himself checking the security footage. He fast-forwarded through hours of the day until he saw her again. She had stayed for another 2 hours after he left, just standing there. Then, as the sun began to set, she finally turned and walked away. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. He could feel it now, that strange pull in his chest. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, something he didn't want to name. The next morning he made a decision. He was going to find out who this girl really was and why she kept coming back to his house. And more importantly, he was going to find out why, despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen her before. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Nicholas had spent his entire life making decisions based on logic. Emotions, distractions, and unnecessary attachments had no place in his world. But as he sat in his home office that morning, staring at the paused security footage of Lily standing outside his mansion, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: unease. He had already asked his assistant to dig into public records, searching for any information on a Lily who lived in Lincoln Heights. But he knew there was only one real way to get answers. He had to find her himself. The thought of personally looking into the matter was ridiculous. He was Nicholas Reed, one of the most powerful men in Los Angeles. He had teams of people who handled problems for him. But this wasn't a business deal. This was different. By early afternoon, he was in the back of his Mercedes, heading toward Lincoln Heights. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to the polished luxury of Beverly Hills. The streets were lined with older apartment buildings, many of them with peeling paint and rusted balconies. The sidewalks were cracked and kids rode their bikes past graffiti-covered walls. It wasn't the worst part of the city, but it wasn't a place Nicholas had ever had a reason to visit before. Luis glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You sure about this, boss?" Nicholas adjusted his cufflinks. "Just drive." They parked near a small grocery store on a street filled with aging duplexes and mom-and-pop shops. Nicholas stepped out, feeling out of place in his tailored suit and expensive watch. He had no idea where to start. He considered asking around, but what would he even say? "Have you seen a little girl who stares at my mansion every day?" As he walked down the street, he spotted a laundromat with its door propped open. Inside, an older woman was folding clothes while chatting with a younger woman who was sorting laundry. Nicholas stepped inside, and the conversation stopped as both women looked up at him. "Can I help you?" the older woman asked, eyeing his suit. "I'm looking for a girl named Lily," Nicholas said. "She's about 8 or 9 years old, lives around here." The younger woman frowned. "Lily who?" Nicholas hesitated. He didn't even know her last name. "She said her mom works a lot." The older woman exchanged a glance with the younger one. Then she sighed. "You talking about Lily Ramirez?" Nicholas felt a flicker of something. Relief, maybe? Possibly. "Where does she live?" The woman hesitated. "Why are you looking for her?" Nicholas considered lying, but something told him honesty would get him further. "She's been coming to my house in Beverly Hills. She never asks for anything, just stands outside. I want to know why." The younger woman's eyes widened. "She goes all the way to Beverly Hills?" Nicholas nodded. The older woman sighed again. "Lily and her mom live in that blue building on the corner. Apartment 4B. But listen, her mom Maria, she's a good woman. Works 2 jobs. They don't need trouble." Nicholas nodded. "I'm not here to cause trouble." As he left the laundromat, his mind raced. He had a name now. Lily Ramirez. And he had an address. But what would he even say to her mother? That her daughter had been staring at his house and he wanted to know why? Sounded absurd. Still, he found himself walking toward the blue apartment building. It was small, with faded paint and a rusty metal staircase leading to the second floor. He climbed the steps and knocked on the door marked 4B. There was a long pause before the door finally creaked open. A woman in her early 30s stood there, dark circles under her eyes, her brown hair pulled into a messy bun. She was wearing scrubs, probably just back from a shift at a hospital or clinic. She looked at him warily. "Can I help you?" Nicholas hesitated for a brief second. "Are you Maria Ramirez?" "Yeah." "Who are you?" "My name is Nicholas Reed. Your daughter Lily has been coming to my house every day." Maria's face changed instantly. Alarm, then frustration. "Oh God. Look, I'm sorry if she's bothering you. She's not supposed to be wandering off like that. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." Nicholas held up a hand. "She's not bothering me. I just want to know why." Maria sighed, rubbing her forehead. "She's been acting weird lately. Won't tell me much, just that she likes walking around. I didn't know she was going that far." Nicholas glanced past her into the small apartment. It was clean but cramped, old furniture, a tiny TV in the corner, schoolbooks piled on a small dining table. He could hear soft music playing from another room. "Can I talk to her?" he asked. Maria hesitated. Then she sighed. "Lily," she called. A moment later, the little girl appeared in the hallway. When she saw Nicholas, she didn't look surprised. She just stood there watching him. Maria folded her arms. "Lily, why have you been going to this man's house?" Lily didn't answer right away. Then, in that same quiet voice, she said, Because it's Daddy's house. Nicholas felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He stared at the girl, then at Maria, who went pale. Maria turned to Lily. "Sweetheart, we talked about this." "That's not—" She stopped, looking at Nicholas as if realizing something. Nicholas' voice was low. "What is she talking about?" Maria took a deep breath. "You should go." Nicholas stepped forward. "No. You're going to tell me what's going on. Now." Maria looked down at Lily, then back at Nicholas. Her jaw tightened. "Because, Mr. Reed, I think you might be her father. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends." Nicholas stood frozen in the doorway, his mind struggling to process Maria's words. The possibility that he had a daughter, one he had never known about, sent a shock through his entire body. His voice, usually so controlled and authoritative, came out quieter than he intended. "That's not possible." But even as he said it, doubt crept into his chest. Maria didn't look like a woman who was lying or trying to manipulate him for money. She looked exhausted, defensive, and maybe even a little scared. Lily stood between them, staring up at him with those wide brown eyes, waiting for an answer. Maria stepped back, gripping the doorframe as if she needed to steady herself. "I don't need anything from you, Nicholas. I never have. But if you're here looking for answers, then maybe it's time you hear the truth." She motioned for him to come inside, and despite every instinct telling him to walk away, he found himself stepping into the small apartment. The place was neat but worn, the furniture mismatched, the walls decorated with framed photos of Lily at different ages. A pang of something unfamiliar hit him as he realized he had missed every single moment of her life. Birthday parties, school events, even just ordinary days, he hadn't been there for any of it. Maria gestured toward the small couch. "Sit." Nicholas obeyed, though his muscles were tense. Maria sat across from him in a wooden chair, while Lily hesitated before curling up on the couch next to her mother. Nicholas exhaled. "Explain." Maria ran a hand through her hair, looking both frustrated and resigned. "We met 9 years ago. San Francisco. You were there for a business deal and I was working at the hotel. You don't remember me, do you?" Nicholas frowned, his mind racing back to those years. His life had been a blur of meetings, mergers, and late nights spent in luxury hotels. He had been with women, yes, but never with any serious intention. He had always been careful. Hadn't he? But as he looked at Maria, small memories flickered. A warm laugh, a hotel bar, a conversation that had lasted until dawn. Maria saw the recognition on his face and nodded. "I didn't expect anything from you. You left and I never tried to find you. I found out I was pregnant a month later. I didn't even know how to reach you." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Not that you would have cared." Nicholas flinched at that. Was that true? Would he have walked away back then? Maybe. He had been a different man. One who saw emotions as liabilities and family as nothing more than a distraction. But now, staring at the little girl in front of him, he wasn't sure anymore. "Are you sure?" His voice was hoarse. Maria's eyes narrowed. "I don't play games, Nicholas. I don't lie." Lily, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke. "I just wanted to see you," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to make trouble." Nicholas turned to her, taking in her small face, the way her fingers twisted in her lap. She wasn't asking for anything. Not money. Not a place in his life. She just wanted to know him. The thought of that made something deep in his chest ache in a way he had never experienced before. Maria exhaled sharply. "Look, I don't expect you to suddenly play dad. That's not why I'm telling you this. But she deserves to know where she came from. If you want a paternity test, fine. But don't come into her life just to disappear again. She's been through enough." Nicholas swallowed hard. He had built his empire by making quick, decisive choices. But this wasn't a business deal. This was real, and for the first time in his life he didn't know what the right move was. His mind screamed at him to leave, to pretend this never happened, to go back to the world he understood. But when he looked at Lily, he knew that wasn't an option anymore. "I don't need a test," he finally said, his voice quiet but firm. "I believe you." Maria's shoulders sagged slightly as if she had been bracing for a fight. "Then what now?" Nicholas ran a hand over his face. He had no idea how to be a father. He had no idea what Lily needed or how to make up for 9 years of absence. But he knew one thing: he couldn't just walk away. "I want to get to know her," he admitted. "If you'll let me." Maria studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "We'll start slow. Visits. No promises beyond that. She gets to decide how much she wants." Nicholas turned to Lily. "Is that okay with you?" Lily gave a tiny nod, but her eyes were filled with cautious hope. For the first time in his life, Nicholas Reed felt something shift inside him. Something unfamiliar, something terrifying, but something that, for once, wasn't driven by wealth or power. It was something real. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Nicholas sat in his car outside Maria's apartment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His world had always been predictable, controlled, structured, built on numbers, contracts, and calculated risks. But this was completely foreign. He had spent his entire life avoiding attachments, focusing solely on his business empire. Yet here he was, a man worth billions, paralyzed by the thought of spending an afternoon with a little girl who shared his blood. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car and walked toward the apartment door. He knocked, his heartbeat pounding louder than it should have. Maria opened the door, eyeing him warily before stepping aside. The small living room was filled with the scent of something warm and sweet, cookies maybe. Lily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, crayons and paper spread out around her. She looked up at him, her expression uncertain but curious. "Hi," Nicholas said, his voice rougher than he intended. Lily hesitated before responding. "Hi." An awkward silence settled between them. Nicholas had negotiated billion-dollar deals, convinced boardrooms full of powerful executives to follow his lead, but he had no idea how to talk to a child. He glanced at the paper she was drawing on. "What are you making?" Lily shrugged. "Just a picture." Nicholas knelt down trying to see. The drawing was of a house, big, with tall windows and a winding driveway. His stomach twisted when he realized it looked eerily similar to his own mansion. Maria, who had been watching from the kitchen, finally spoke. "Lily, why don't you show Nicholas your favorite place in the park?" Lily's face brightened slightly and she nodded. "Okay." Nicholas felt an odd sense of relief. At least outside, he wouldn't have to navigate the tight space of the apartment or the weight of Maria's judgmental stares. He followed Lily down the stairs and out onto the street, his long strides slowing to match her smaller steps. The park was only a block away, a small green space with a playground, a walking path and a few benches. Lily led him to a spot under a large oak tree, where a small collection of smooth stones was carefully arranged in a circle. She knelt down, adjusting one of the rocks. "This is my fairy house," she explained, glancing up at him. Nicholas frowned slightly. "Fairies?" Lily nodded seriously. "Yeah. If you build them houses, they bring you good luck." Nicholas crouched beside her, feeling strangely out of place in his expensive suit. "And has it worked?" Lily bit her lip, considering. "Maybe. I wished for something a few weeks ago and it kind of came true." Nicholas felt an unexpected wave of curiosity. "What did you wish for?" She hesitated before answering. "To know who my dad was." The words hit him harder than he expected. He cleared his throat, unsure of what to say. He had spent years avoiding emotional entanglements, but here was this little girl, looking up at him with cautious hope, and he realized, he was the only father she would ever have. He couldn't fail her, not like his own father had failed him. Trying to push past the tightness in his chest, he reached for a small stone and placed it carefully next to the others. "Well, if fairies are real, maybe they'll make sure we get to know each other better." Lily studied him as if trying to figure out if he was serious or just humoring her. Finally she gave a small smile. "Maybe." They stayed in the park for nearly an hour, Lily explaining every detail of her fairy house, occasionally glancing at him as if waiting for him to disappear. Nicholas listened, asked questions and even helped her rearrange some of the stones. It was the longest he had ever spent with a child, and for the first time in a long time he wasn't thinking about work, deals or money. When they finally walked back to the apartment, Maria was watching from the window. She opened the door before they even knocked. "Everything okay?" she asked, her gaze shifting between them. Lily nodded. "Yeah." Maria raised an eyebrow at Nicholas. "So, how'd it go?" Nicholas wasn't sure how to answer. It had been strange, uncomfortable at times, but also different. "It went well," he admitted. Maria nodded slowly. "Good. Because she's been waiting a long time for this." Nicholas met Maria's eyes, reading the unspoken warning there. She was trusting him, cautiously. And he knew, without her saying it, that if he hurt Lily in any way, he'd never get another chance. As he turned to leave, Lily hesitated before speaking. "Will you come back?" Nicholas didn't hesitate. "Yes." For the first time Lily's face lit up with a smile that was small but real. And as Nicholas walked back to his car, he realized something unsettling. For the first time in years he actually wanted to keep a promise. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Nicholas found himself staring at his own reflection in the large glass windows of his office in downtown Chicago. The city stretched out before him, tall buildings piercing the sky, the streets below filled with people moving quickly, each lost in their own world. Just a week ago, his life had been as structured and predictable as those streets. Meetings, negotiations, profits. Now everything felt different. His mind kept drifting back to Lily, her small hands carefully arranging stones in the park, her hesitant smile when he promised he would come back. He had never made time for anything other than his business, but now, for the first time in his life, something else demanded his attention, something he couldn't ignore. His assistant, Julia, knocked softly before stepping in. "Sir, your 3 p.m. meeting with the investors is about to start." Nicholas sighed, rubbing his temples. "Reschedule it." Julia hesitated. In the years she had worked for him, he had never postponed a meeting unless it was an emergency. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said more firmly this time. Something came up. An hour later, he was standing in front of Maria's apartment again, feeling strangely nervous. He knocked, and after a moment Maria opened the door, looking surprised. "You're early," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Lily home?" he asked, glancing around the small apartment. It was neat but worn down, the furniture old, the walls decorated with crayon drawings. He noticed a few bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the red stamp of "past due" glaring at him. Maria nodded toward the bedroom. "She's doing her homework. You can go in if you want." Nicholas hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. Lily was sitting at a small desk, her pencil moving quickly across the page. She looked up, startled when she saw him. "You came." "I said I would, didn't I?" he replied, leaning against the doorframe. Lily smiled, and the sight of it did something to him, something unfamiliar and unsettling. He had spent years building an empire, making ruthless decisions, cutting ties without a second thought. But now, a 7-year-old girl's smile made him feel like he had accomplished something greater than any business deal. "Whatcha working on?" he asked, nodding at her notebook. "Math," she said, wrinkling her nose. "I hate it." Nicholas chuckled. "I used to hate it too. Until I figured out how to make money with it." Lily tilted her head. "You make money with math?" He pulled up a chair, sitting beside her. "Sort of. Business is all about numbers. If you understand them, you can do anything. Start a company, sell things, even buy a mansion like the one you drew." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really?" he said. "Want me to show you a trick?" She nodded eagerly, pushing her notebook toward him. He spent the next half hour explaining simple calculations in a way that made sense to her. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about stocks or profits, he was just talking, teaching. And it felt good. Maria watched them from the doorway, her arms crossed. When Nicholas finally stood up, she followed him to the living room. "I don't get it," she said quietly. "Don't get what?" "This," she gestured toward the bedroom. "You. Being here. Teaching her math. A month ago you didn't even know she existed. And now you're showing up like you care." Nicholas exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Because I do care." Maria studied him as if trying to gauge his sincerity. "You think you can just walk into her life and fix everything? You think spending an hour with her makes up for 7 years of nothing?" "No," he admitted. "I don't. But I want to try." Maria shook her head. "Trying isn't enough, Nicholas. She's a kid. She doesn't need a visitor. She needs a father. Can you be that?" He didn't answer right away. The truth was he didn't know. He had built a life around avoiding attachments, around keeping people at a distance. But Lily had already shattered that wall. "I want to be in her life," he finally said. "I don't know how to do this, but I'm willing to learn." Maria sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting his gaze again. "Then don't disappear on her." He nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. As he left the apartment and stepped into the cold Chicago air, he realized something. For the first time, his future wasn't about business meetings or stock prices. It was about something far more important. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Nicholas had spent most of his life in boardrooms, surrounded by sharp suits and high-stakes deals, where emotions were seen as weaknesses. But standing outside Maria's apartment that evening, he felt something unfamiliar: fear. Not fear of failure or losing money, but the fear of disappointing a little girl who had no idea what kind of man he had been. He had never been a father. He had never even considered the possibility before. And yet, here he was, about to step into a role he had never imagined for himself. When he knocked on the door, it was Lily who answered. Her face lit up the moment she saw him. "You came again," she said excitedly, stepping aside to let him in. I told you I would, he replied with a small smile. Maria, who was in the kitchen drying dishes, glanced at him with the same wary expression she always had. She wasn't stopping him from seeing Lily, but she wasn't exactly welcoming him with open arms either. Nicholas understood why. Trust wasn't something that could be earned overnight. Lily pulled him toward the small living room, where a few sheets of paper were spread out on the coffee table. I made you something, she announced proudly, picking up one of the sheets and handing it to him. He looked down and felt his throat tighten. It was a drawing, a simple crayon sketch of a tall man in a suit standing next to a little girl. They were holding hands, and above them, in her uneven handwriting, she had written, "Me and my dad." Nicholas had seen many things in his life that had left him speechless. Multi-million-dollar contracts, billion-dollar mergers, even the view from the top of the tallest buildings in the world. But nothing had ever hit him as hard as that drawing. He swallowed, looking down at Lily's eager face. You like it? She asked. He nodded, his voice rough. I love it. Lily grinned. I made another one too. She shuffled through the papers and held up another drawing. This one was of a house, not his mansion but a small, cozy home with flowers in front and a tree beside it. This is the house I want when we're together, she explained, her voice full of innocent certainty. Not too big, not too small. Just right. Nicholas stared at the picture, his mind racing. Lily wasn't dreaming of wealth or luxury. She wasn't impressed by mansions or expensive cars. All she wanted was something simple, something he had never considered valuable before. Maria walked into the room, drying her hands on a dish towel. Lily, why don't you get your book and show Nicholas the story you wrote? Lily nodded enthusiastically and ran off to her room. Maria folded her arms and looked at Nicholas. You look like someone just hit you with a brick. He let out a dry laugh. That obvious? She nodded. Lily doesn't want your money, Nicholas. She just wants a family. You think you're ready for that? He hesitated. I don't know. Maria's expression softened slightly. At least you're honest. She sighed, glancing toward the hallway where Lily had disappeared. She's a kid. She dreams big. But she also trusts too easily. Don't let her down. Nicholas ran a hand through his hair. I don't want to. Lily came running back holding a small notebook. She plopped down on the couch next to Nicholas and opened it to the first page. I wrote a story about a princess, she said excitedly. But she's not like the other princesses. She doesn't live in a castle. Nicholas smiled. Where does she live? In a little house with her dad, Lily said. She doesn't need a big castle because she has love, and love is better than gold. Nicholas felt something tighten in his chest. A 7-year-old had just spoken words that he, a millionaire CEO, had never truly understood. For so long he had chased wealth, believing it would bring him happiness. But Lily was showing him something different, something he wasn't sure he deserved. That's a beautiful story, he told her sincerely. Lily beamed. You think so? I know so, he said. She curled up beside him, flipping through the pages. Nicholas found himself watching her, realizing just how much she had already changed his life. A few weeks ago he had been completely alone despite all his wealth. Now there was this little girl dreaming of a future that included him. As the evening wore on, Nicholas stayed longer than he had planned. He helped Lily with her reading, listened to her stories, and even let her teach him how to draw, though his stick figures were embarrassingly bad. Maria didn't say much, but he could tell she was watching him closely, trying to figure out if he was serious about this. When it was finally time for him to leave, Lily clung to his arm. You'll come back, right? He knelt down so they were at eye level. Of course I will. Promise? I promise. As he walked out into the cold Chicago night, Nicholas realized something. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. This was about him too. He had spent years believing he had everything he needed. But now, for the first time he saw the truth, he had been missing something far more important than money. And he wasn't going to let it slip away. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Nicholas sat in his office at the top of the Willis Tower, staring out at the Chicago skyline, but his mind was nowhere near the world of business. For years, this view had represented everything he had worked for: success, power, wealth. Now, it all felt hollow compared to the warmth of a small apartment where a little girl with hopeful eyes had drawn a picture of him as her father. The thought unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. He had spent years avoiding attachments, believing they were distractions, weaknesses even. But Lily had broken through those walls without even trying. His assistant, Denise, knocked on the glass door before stepping inside. Mr. Sullivan, your board meeting starts in 15 minutes. Nicholas barely nodded. Cancel it. Denise blinked, clearly surprised. Cancel the board meeting? Yes. Reschedule it for tomorrow. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. She hesitated for a moment before nodding. Understood. As she left, Nicholas leaned back in his chair and exhaled deeply. He wasn't sure what was happening to him. He had never canceled a board meeting in his entire career. But suddenly, corporate strategies and quarterly profits seemed meaningless compared to the simple dream of a child who just wanted a father. He pulled out his phone and, before he could overthink it, dialed Maria's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Hello. It's me, he said. I was wondering if I could take Lily out for the afternoon. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment he thought she might refuse. Then she sighed. Where do you want to take her? I don't know. Somewhere fun. Maybe the zoo? Or the aquarium? Maria hesitated again, then finally said, She's been wanting to go to the Shed Aquarium for months, but I haven't had the time or the money. Nicholas felt a pang of guilt. For him, taking a child to an aquarium was something he could do without a second thought. For Maria, it was something that required careful budgeting and planning. I'll pick her up in an hour? He asked. Make it 2, Maria said. She's at school. 2 hours later, Nicholas found himself standing outside Lily's school, feeling strangely nervous. He had never picked up a child from school before. He didn't even know how it worked. Did parents have to sign something? Did teachers ask questions? Before he could figure it out, the school doors swung open and a wave of children poured out. He spotted Lily instantly. She was walking with 2 other girls, laughing about something, but the moment she saw him, her face lit up. Nicholas, she shouted, running toward him. He crouched slightly, catching her in a hug. The warmth of her tiny arms around his neck was something he hadn't expected, and it nearly took his breath away. Hey kiddo, he said, ruffling her hair. Ready for an adventure? Her eyes widened. Where are we going? The Shed Aquarium. Her mouth dropped open. Really? Are you serious? Completely serious. She squealed in excitement, turning to her friends. I'm going to the aquarium. The other girls looked at Nicholas with curiosity before one of them asked, Is he your dad? Lily hesitated, then grinned. Almost. Nicholas felt his heart tighten at her words. Almost. The drive to the aquarium was filled with Lily's endless chatter. She talked about school, her favorite animals, and a book she was reading about sea turtles. Nicholas listened, genuinely fascinated by the way she saw the world. She had a way of making everything sound magical, even something as simple as a jellyfish. At the aquarium, she pulled him from one exhibit to another, her excitement contagious. She pressed her hands against the glass, watching the dolphins with wide eyes. Do you think they're happy? She asked. Nicholas glanced at the sleek, graceful creatures swimming effortlessly through the water. I think so. Lily nodded thoughtfully. I hope so. I don't like the idea of anyone being trapped. He swallowed hard, realizing she wasn't just talking about dolphins. She was talking about herself. About the tiny apartment, the limited world she had known her whole life. They spent hours exploring, and by the time they left, Lily was holding a stuffed sea otter Nicholas had bought her from the gift shop. She named it Oliver and held it close as they walked to the car. Today was the best day ever, she said, looking up at him. Can we do it again? Nicholas smiled. Of course. When he dropped her off at home, Maria was waiting at the door. She looked at Lily, who was still beaming, then at Nicholas. She had fun, she said. She did, he agreed. Maria nodded slowly, as if she were trying to make peace with something in her mind. Finally she said, Would you like to come in for dinner? Nicholas hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because he wasn't sure he was ready for what it meant. But then he looked down at Lily, who was clutching his hand as if she never wanted to let go, and he made his decision. I'd love to. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Nicholas had never felt more out of place in his life. Sitting at Maria's small but cozy dining table, he found himself in a world completely different from his own. The kitchen smelled of home-cooked food, something he couldn't remember experiencing since childhood. Maria had made chicken Alfredo, and Lily was chatting non-stop, excitedly retelling every detail of their trip to the Shed Aquarium. Nicholas listened intently, occasionally glancing at Maria, who remained quiet, observing him with cautious curiosity. He knew she was still trying to figure him out, trying to determine whether he was just another rich man who would disappear as soon as the novelty wore off. Lily took a bite of her food and then turned to Nicholas. You should come over more often, she said, her voice innocent but firm, as if she had already made up her mind that this was the new normal. We could have movie nights. And you can teach me about business stuff like stocks and investments. Nicholas nearly choked on his water. Stocks and investments? He repeated with a laugh. Where did you even hear about that? Lily shrugged. I read a book from the library about millionaires. It said they invest money in things to make more money. Do you do that? He nodded. That's a big part of what I do, yes. Lily looked impressed. I want to learn. Maybe I can be a millionaire too. Maria sighed. Lily, honey, let's focus on school first. Nicholas smiled. She's ambitious. That's a good thing. Maria looked at him, her eyes searching his face for something. Ambition is good, she admitted, but stability is more important. Money doesn't mean anything if you don't have people who care about you. Nicholas nodded, though her words hit deeper than he expected. He had spent his whole life chasing financial success, building an empire so vast that he no longer had to think about money. And yet, here he was, sitting in a modest home, realizing that all his wealth couldn't buy the simple happiness that this family had. After dinner, Maria insisted on washing the dishes, but Nicholas stood up and started drying them without being asked. She raised an eyebrow at him. You do dishes? He smirked. I'm a billionaire, not helpless. She laughed softly, shaking her head. I just can't imagine you in a kitchen. I always pictured rich people having maids for everything. I do, he admitted. But I wasn't always rich. I know how to take care of myself. Maria's expression shifted slightly, as if she had just remembered that there was more to him than the headlines and the luxury cars. Where did you grow up? She asked, handing him another dish. South side of Chicago, he said. We weren't rich. Not even close. She looked surprised. I thought you came from money. He shook his head. No. My dad was a mechanic. My mom worked as a waitress. We struggled. A lot. Maria's gaze softened. So, you understand what it's like? Nicholas nodded. Yeah. That's why I worked so hard to get where I am. I never wanted to feel powerless again. She was silent for a moment, then said, Power isn't just about money, you know? Nicholas didn't respond right away. He had spent his entire life believing that money was the ultimate power, the key to control, security, and influence. But Maria was right. Sitting in this tiny kitchen, listening to Lily laugh as she played with her stuffed sea otter, Nicholas realized that there was a different kind of power, one that came from love, from connection, from being needed. As he dried the last dish, Maria leaned against the counter, watching him. So, she said, crossing her arms, why are you really doing this? He met her eyes, knowing she deserved the truth. Because Lily made me see something I've been avoiding for years, he admitted. I've spent my life building an empire, but I have nothing real. No family. No one who actually cares about me for who I am instead of what I can give them. Maria studied him for a long moment. And now? Now, I'm realizing that maybe I want more than just business deals and luxury penthouses, he said. Maybe I want something real. Maria sighed, rubbing her temples. Nicholas, I appreciate what you're doing for Lily. I do. But I need to protect her. She's already been let down before. I can't let that happen again. I understand, he said. And I don't blame you for being cautious. But I'm not going anywhere. She searched his face again as if looking for any hint of dishonesty. Whatever she saw made her nod slightly, though there was still hesitation in her eyes. We'll see, she murmured. Lily ran into the kitchen then, clutching Oliver the sea otter. Nicholas, will you tuck me in? She asked. Nicholas blinked, caught off guard. Tuck you in? Maria smiled slightly. It's part of the bedtime routine. Lily grabbed his hand and dragged him toward her tiny bedroom. The walls were decorated with drawings and posters of animals. She climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. You have to tell me a bedtime story, she demanded. Nicholas hesitated. He had closed million-dollar deals, negotiated with some of the most powerful people in the world, but he had no idea how to tell a bedtime story. What kind of story? Lily giggled. A fun one. Make one up. He sat on the edge of her bed, thinking. Okay. Once upon a time in a big city, there was a little girl who dreamed of becoming a millionaire. Lily gasped. Like me? He nodded. Exactly like you. But she didn't just want money, she wanted to help people too. So, she started a business where she rescued animals and found them homes. And because she was so smart and kind, people trusted her. She became the best animal rescuer in the whole world. Lily beamed. That's the best story ever. Nicholas smiled, feeling something warm spread in his chest. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Good night, Lily. She yawned, snuggling deeper into her blankets. Good night, Nicholas. As he left her room, he found Maria leaning against the doorway watching him. You're good with her, she admitted. Nicholas shrugged. She makes it easy. Maria sighed, crossing her arms. I don't know where this is going, she said honestly. But, thank you. For today. For everything. Nicholas nodded. I meant what I said, Maria. I'm not going anywhere. Maria gave him one last look before stepping aside to let him pass. As he walked toward the door, he realized something had shifted tonight. It wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about Maria too. And for the first time in his life, Nicholas Sullivan felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Nicholas stood in front of the small two-bedroom house in Chicago's South Side, the place that had somehow become more of a home to him than his million-dollar penthouse. Tonight, the house was buzzing with energy. It was Lily's birthday, and Maria had allowed Nicholas to help with the preparations. He had insisted on handling the cake, and despite Maria's protest that a simple homemade one would do, he had gone all out, bringing in a custom cake shaped like an open treasure chest filled with edible gold coins, Lily's idea. The sight of her face lighting up when she saw it had made every dollar spent worth it. As the guests, mostly Maria's friends and neighbors, sang happy birthday, Nicholas found himself watching Lily closely. The little girl who had once stared longingly at his mansion was now surrounded by love, her cheeks flushed with excitement as she blew out the candles. He had spent months getting to know her and Maria, months that had transformed him in ways he never thought possible. He had gone from being a distant observer to someone who truly cared, not just in a passing way but in a deep, unshakable sense. After the cake was cut and the presents were opened, Nicholas stepped outside for some air. The Chicago night was crisp, and he could hear the faint sounds of the city in the distance. He had been reflecting a lot lately, questioning everything he had once thought important. For so long he had measured success by his bank balance, his power, his influence. But what did any of that mean when, at the end of the day, there was no one to share it with? Maria joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. You look like you're thinking too hard, she teased. He chuckled. Maybe I am. He turned to face her, searching for the right words. You know, when I first saw Lily staring at my house, I thought she was just another kid curious about the life of a rich man. I had no idea how much that moment would change me. Maria smiled softly. You've changed a lot, Nicholas. I can see it. He nodded. I feel it. And I don't want to go back to the way things were. I don't want to be that man who hides behind business deals and luxury anymore. He exhaled slowly, gathering his courage. I know I've been spending a lot of time here. I know I don't exactly fit into this world. But I don't want to be a visitor anymore. I want to be part of it, for real. Maria's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and understanding. What are you saying? He took her hands gently, feeling the warmth of her fingers against his own. I'm saying I want to be here. Not just for Lily but for you too. He hesitated for a moment before adding, I'm in love with you, Maria. Her eyes widened and for a moment she said nothing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she let out a soft breath and smiled. Nicholas, I won't lie, I've been scared. I didn't know if this was real or if you'd just move on one day. But you've proven me wrong time and time again. He squeezed her hands. I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Maria smiled and for the first time, stepped closer to him. Then maybe, we give this a chance. Nicholas felt something settle inside him, a peace he had never known before. He had spent his whole life chasing success, but tonight, standing here with Maria, he realized he had finally found what really mattered. Inside, Lily ran toward them, her eyes shining. Are you guys going to kiss now? She asked, grinning mischievously. Maria laughed, shaking her head. Lily. Nicholas chuckled. Not yet. But maybe someday. Lily clapped her hands. Yeah. Does this mean you're staying forever, Nicholas? He bent down to her level and looked her in the eyes. Yeah, kid. I'm staying forever. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, squeezing him tightly. Nicholas held her close, feeling something he had never felt before, true belonging. And as he stood there, surrounded by the warmth of a family he never expected to have, he knew one thing for sure. He was finally home. If you've liked this story, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends.